Welcome to Speak English Now podcast with your host, Georgiana, the podcast that will help you to speak English fluently with no grammar and no textbooks.
Did you know that most English learners know more grammar than a native speaker, but can barely speak? Is that so? Now that's pure irony. Hi, I'm Georgiana. Thanks for joining me for a new episode of the Speak English Now podcast. Today we have a very interesting topic. I'm going to talk about 3 concepts that are often confused: irony, sarcasm, and cynicism. Next, you'll practice verb tenses with a short story about 2 kids who have a problem on a frozen lake. Okay, let's get started. Yes, it's true that many language learners know more grammar than the average native speaker, yet they can barely speak fluently. That's why I recommend my mini course, where you can understand how to develop your speech, among other things. Go now to speakenglishpodcast.com and sign up now. It's free. Well, let's get down to business. What is the difference between irony, sarcasm, and cynicism? We are going to analyze these concepts one by one, and of course, I will give you some examples. You learn very well with examples, and that's not irony. Let's start with irony. Irony is an expression that implies something contrary or different from what is said, usually as a disguised mockery. Okay, to make it clear, a mockery is an action or words with the intention of laughing at something or someone. It can also be a simple joke. Irony is sometimes directed at oneself or a situation. Let's look at an example. How was the date with that girl you met? Ah, fantastic. It couldn't have gone better. She said she would call me, but she didn't ask for my phone number. When in the dialogue he says, "It couldn't have gone better," he's obviously saying the opposite of reality, and uses it as a subtle mockery of himself. Irony also occurs when there is an outcome that is not expected. For example, a fire in a firehouse, or the financial advisor going bankrupt, or a dietitian with overweight problems. All these situations have their dose of irony. Now let's look at sarcasm. Sarcasm is very similar to irony, but what differentiates it is the intention. Sarcasm is a cruel irony with which someone or something is offended or mistreated. The person using sarcasm seeks to ridicule, humiliate, or insult. Example: the report won't be ready today. I think I'll finish it next week. Ah, Tom, you always such a hard worker. In this example, sarcasm is used to attack Tom's work and made it clear that he works slowly. And finally, cynicism. I'm not going to go into the philosophical doctrine of cynicism from ancient Greece, but how it's commonly used. There are two ways of understanding cynicism. First, a cynical person is someone who has no shame. He or she lies unashamedly and defends dishonorable behavior and actions. In other words, someone who has no principles and acts without ethics and morals. For example, a politician is found to be corrupt, and he, instead of apologizing, says, "Well, this is commonplace. All politicians, in one way or another, do similar things." Second, cynicism also refers to extreme skepticism. The cynic no longer believes in anything. He doesn't believe in politics. He doesn't believe in relationships, in friendship, etc. This leads to not trusting anything, having no principles, and being suspicious of everything. In a way, it can lead to behave like the previous explanation about cynicism. I have a friend who thinks this way. In some things, she's not wrong. Perhaps the opposite of this kind of cynicism is extreme positivism. Okay, now we know these three concepts a little better. Information is power, and use power responsibly. Now, let's move on to practice with a short point of view story. I tell you the same story twice. The second time, I change some grammar aspect, like the verb tense. This way, you can practice the grammar intuitively and without memorizing anything. Come on, the first time in the past tense. On a cold winter afternoon, two children decided to go skating on a nearby frozen lake. They put on their skates and started skating, having fun as only children can have fun. Suddenly, the ice broke, and one of them fell into the water, landing under the ice. Quickly, the other boy grabbed a small rock and hit the ice ferociously until he managed to break it and save his friend. When the ambulance and police arrived, they were shocked at what happened and wondered, how did this little boy manage to break through the ice? It's impossible. It's too thick. An older man who saw it all happen said, "I know how the child managed to break the ice." And they asked him, "How?" The older man answered, "There was no one to tell him he couldn't do it." Now, we change the point of view from the children's perspective and in the present tense. On a cold winter afternoon, my friend and I decided to go skating on a nearby frozen lake. We put on our skates and start skating, having fun as only we kids have fun. Suddenly, the ice breaks and my friend falls into the water, getting under the ice. Quickly, I grab a small rock and hit the ice ferociously until I managed to break it and save my friend. When the ambulance and police arrive, they are shocked at what has happened and wonder, how did I manage to break through the ice? It's impossible. It's too thick. An older man who has seen everything that has happened says, I know how the child has managed to break the ice. And they asked him, How? The older man replies, There was no one to tell him he couldn't do it. You know, sometimes you have to follow your instinct. And speaking of instincts, follow yours and get my complete courses at speakenglishpodcast.com/courses.
Did you enjoy today's episode? Get the transcript now at speakenglishpodcast.com.